Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri
and Amy Cornell.
And today we are talking about the age-old question of how to get picked up by media. And we're going to be looking at national media for sure, but we're also going to be talking a little bit about local media, which is something that I know authors a lot of times overlook. I want to thank you all for listening. If this is your first time, if you're just now tuning in, we welcome to the show. We had 5 years with the show, so feel free to go back and kind of get to know us and get to know the topics that we talk about. If you are a multi-episode listener, we're so glad that you're here. Thank you also for some of the great reviews that we've been getting. We love reviews. We always check them. It's actually scary how many times we check. We check for reviews, so we appreciate it. And I know that it's sometimes difficult to leave a review. And matter of fact, I just got an email from somebody who mentioned that somebody in the book marketing arena, and she's like, "Oh, it's really hard to leave reviews on Apple Podcasts. I don't know why they make it so difficult, but anyway, you're welcome to always email us the review, and we'll post it for sure." So, and the other thing that I wanted to mention, which I think is, which I know is really amazing, is we just got voted the number one book marketing blog / website in the entire planet. And it was a FeedSpot article that we got just yesterday. And if you follow me on social, you probably saw me cheering and super excited. So yeah, book marketing blogs, we are number one. I don't even know what to say. I was just so stoked about that.
I know, that was very cool. And you're right. When Penny pointed it out to me, she texted me about it. She said, "On the planet." And I'm like, that's a funny, that's a funny differential, but I love it. We will absolutely take that.
Yeah, on the planet. I love that. I will definitely take it. So thank you for whoever voted us. And if you're not familiar with our blog, amarketingexpert.com / / I always get the slashes confused. Blog. I think you can find it that way. You can also go to our homepage and there's a link to the blog. So we have a lot of content. We put out a lot of content. In fact, it's funny because I was sharing that with somebody yesterday and they were like, "Wait, you have a blog and you have a podcast and you're doing the podcast weekly and you have all this content on the blog?" I said, "Yeah." They said, you create a lot of content. And I said, "Yeah, we do create a lot of content," because I think, and Amy and I both feel the same way. Information is power, and the educated author makes better choices, hence the podcast.
Yeah.
And speaking of better choices, one of the top things that authors ask both Amy and myself is, I want to get picked up by big national media. I want my book to be on the Today Show, or I want it to be on, whatever, right? And I think that that's a great goal to have, obviously, but it's a lot of times authors will say, "I want this. Can't you just pitch them?" Right. And I mean, Amy, do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because you and I have had multiple conversations on this topic.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the toughest part, and we talk about this a lot because we completely understand where it comes from. You have goals. You say, "I want this, I want that." That's amazing. But you really have to remember to put yourself on the other side of the equation and think about, what is the media looking for? What are thought leaders looking for? Because people, believe it or not, these outlets don't exist to do favors for anybody or to help them promote their work or their business, or, you know what I mean? So featuring your work, interviewing you, all of that reflects directly on the outlet or the organization or the individual that you're trying to pitch to. And it's really important to keep that in mind. They have an image to maintain. They have followers that they want to be sure that they are putting out the right content for. That's how they make their money. That's how they build their brands. So these people are not, I'm just going to be blunt about it. They are not going to go out on a limb for you to just give you your shot at fame.
Right.
So a lot about getting media coverage and securing yeses is putting in the work to make sure you're presenting yourself as a sure thing and that you're also doing your part to meet them. Honestly, Penny, I would say it's more than halfway. You know what I mean? This is more of an 80-20 sort of situation. You really have to bring it and you have to show them that you have something to offer and you have to make it click for them that this is what I have to offer your followers. It makes sense for you. It makes sense for them. They're going to be happy. You're going to be happy. It's going to work out great for everybody. And that's really when people start getting yeses.
Well, and I think that, yeah, I agree with that totally. I also think that authors are, the authors that I speak to a lot of times make the assumption that because we've been doing this for a while, that we have all these contacts. And I always explain to authors, I say, it doesn't, I mean, yes, the contacts absolutely matter. But at the end of the day, the contacts are looking for, so those producers, whatever, they're looking for things, as Amy pointed out, that are going to matter to their followers. So my having a quote unquote in with a major morning show is still not going to guarantee you a spot on that show because it has to be, I mean, there's so much money in any of these shows, in the
Oh my gosh.
advertisers and things like that, right?
Oh, yeah. It's complex.
It's very complex. In fact, what's interesting is that so years ago, we worked with a book, and it was a whole book on Trader Joe's recipes. So it was all the stuff that you could make with things that were specifically to, the Trader Joe's brand. And I actually got on the phone with a producer, the book producer at the Today Show, who said to me, we'd really love to have these authors on. It was two authors. But the problem is Vaughn's is our advertiser.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so they have to look at that. They say, this would be a really fun segment for the show. Like we could, because I said, they'll come to New York, they can do cooking and all this other stuff. And she really loved it. But she said, Vaughn's is our advertiser. So the decisions to have somebody on the show versus not on the show, a lot of times, unfortunately, come down to money. Right.
Right.
So that's the other thing to kind of think of. It's not just a matter, but all of that said, there are ways that you can, if you really say, Penny, look, I get it. I know the odds are challenging, but I really want to position myself correctly. And that's what we're going to focus on in the show. There definitely is a way in. So it's not this, it's not Amy and I saying, don't dream the impossible dream. There's definitely a way in, but you have to be strategic about it.
Yep.
And I think there are a lot of examples that we're going to get to that are, I mean, I would say that pretty much everything that we're talking about today is equally important. So this isn't like do this first and then do that. Honestly, if you can do all of this stuff simultaneously, which I hate to say that, I hate to sound like, oh my gosh, do this all at once as if you have nothing else going on in your life. But they all have equal importance. Like there isn't anything on this list that we say, well, you can kind of wait on this until later, because the sooner that you start, the sooner that you're going to get yourself to a place where you have a platform, you have something that the media is going to pay attention to, and if you're listening to this and you're fiction and you're like, well, do I stand a chance? And yeah, absolutely you do.
Yep.
But you also have to realize that in terms of like fiction authors, for example, the Today Show has on average 4 authors on a year. And
sorry,
those are
almost fell out of my chair every time we talk about that kind of
stuff. I
know,
right? And those are generally fiction authors. So nonfiction, they have maybe a little bit more of an advantage if it ties into something that's going on nationally.
Right.
So that's the other piece of this. I highly recommend do a lot of local media. Mm-hmm. Do a lot of local media. Authors oftentimes want to skip this line. They want to skip this and jump the line, rather, is what I should have said. Do lots of local media. Now, there's a couple of reasons why you want to do it. First off, it's great to get your feet wet in local, right? It's great to, if you're going to make, I mean, I hate to say it like this, like local media is very important and should be respected. But if you're going to make your mistakes, don't make them on national TV, right?
100%.
Right. You know what I mean? If you're going to say too much in an interview, you want to know that you're doing that so that you can work on that. And local media will kind of, you know, again, local media is very important, but if you're going to make your mistakes, make them locally. The other reason that you want to do local media is because if you aspire to be on, I don't know, like any kind of a talk show or, I mean, really any national show, they have scouts everywhere. And Oprah actually started this with her show. So Oprah had scouts all over the country. And of course, it's a lot easier now with social media than it was in the Oprah show, you know, era.
Right.
But they pay attention to local stories because ideally, you know, every single show that's on every, you know, midday show, morning show, they're all competing to be the first one to the news trough, so to speak, which is why, you know, this is an unfortunate byproduct of that, but you'll see news outlets making retractions on stories that they jumped on that weren't quite accurate, which really, you know, that's a whole separate sidebar conversation, but they really want to be the first one with that story. So a lot of these news places are looking for stories locally. Okay. And, you know, as an example, which is probably unfortunately still going on as we're recording this podcast, the Karen Read trial, right? So that has, everybody's like obsessed with the Karen Read trial. Amy and I both have conversations about it. And part of the reason why that got so much attention was because, I mean, it got a lot of local fervor, right? But then, and I can't believe that I'm actually saying this on the podcast. Then some guy named Turtle Boy took off with this. The point being is that unfortunately there are murder trials going on every day in this country, right? The majority of them don't make that kind of national news. Something about this really sparked, and the rest, as they say, is history. Your national media is looking for stories at a local level that nobody else has touched yet. And so that's part of the reason why doing local media, saturate yourself with local media. In fact, there's a story, and I know I've shared it before on this show. There were two authors, and they lived in New Orleans, and they wrote a cookbook on Cajun cooking, which honestly, if you go into any bookstore in that area, I mean, you could literally throw a rock and hit 50 Cajun cookbooks. Like, it's not a novelty thing. But they did every single local media outlet, both in their area and all the surrounding areas. Like, they were relentless. And they ended up getting they actually ended up getting a big publishing deal because they self-published the book originally. Chicken Soup for the Soul is kind of the same thing. They started out doing all local media, and they did any media. By the way, this is another thing too. Not just local media, but do not say no to media, right? Sometimes we have authors who are like, well, I just, you know, I turned that down because I didn't think that it was really right for me. I mean, there's a difference between it not being right for you or just turning it down because, I'm sorry to say, you're kind of being a snob, right?
Right.
Not being right for you is like, I don't really feel comfortable being on the Howard Stern show because whatever. That's a different scenario. What I'm talking about, even though I have a story about that too, and met an author who went on and did amazingly well on that show and sold like a ton of books. But don't turn down any media, right? Because that's something, and Amy, we see this when authors start to really pick and choose the media that they're going to be on. And it doesn't, I mean, with the exception of like the Howard Stern example that I gave, it doesn't really serve them.
No, exactly. It always blows me away when somebody says no to something.
Yeah.
You know, like I understand if there are plenty of people now that are able to demand some sort of pay to play. And I think podcasts are turning that more too, Penny, just because production costs and things like that. So there might be fees involved, and I can respect if you have to be careful about your budget, but for anything that doesn't actually cost you additional in what you're already investing in you've planned to invest in your marketing plan, it really doesn't make sense to not get in front of those people. And the one that really bugs me, and I think it's pretty common, is when authors say like, well, they don't look like they have a very big following. But if
Yeah.
that person even has 200 people that listen to their recommendations, that follow their advice, that respect their opinions, that's 200 people that you are potentially getting in front of that may end up buying your book.
Yep.
I don't know how anybody can turn that down,
Yeah.
So to say, oh, they don't have at least 10,000 followers, or they don't work for, this tier of media or something like that, just blows me away. And I realize nobody's ever going to, 100% of their followers aren't going to end up being your buyers. But, even if 10% of those people click through and check out your book on Amazon, that is incredible.
Yeah.
And you can't leave those kind of opportunities on the table. So definitely, please, please, please stop saying no, or stop overanalyzing whether or not their following is big enough to determine whether or not it's worth your time.
Right. Exactly. Do you want to take the second bullet, Amy, on the
Yes, because this one is, we do a lot of this. So
huge.
yeah, I'll throw it right out there so I don't bury the lead. But be able to concisely convey what makes you and your work unique, what makes it timely, what makes it important. And I would say most critical of all, what makes it necessary.
Yes.
You have to be able to share these things in a really exciting, fun, interesting way. We help our clients with this kind of language too. So if you're like, I don't know how to write, super compelling stuff, I could tell you about it. But so you could work with a team or work with a professional that can help you fine tune, your message, but you have to be able to give them something to work with. You need to be the expert in your book. And I think we have that conversation with authors a lot, Penny, and it surprises them. When they say like, well, what do you think about my book? And what are, you know what I mean? They're asking us questions that we kind of have to push back on them and say, you need to know the answers to that.
Yeah.
You are the expert in your work. You are the expert in your point of view. That is not something that we can create for you. That is something that should have been ingrained in your book from day one, and in your message and in your content. And I think another one, so do your competitive research, make sure you know what makes you unique. This is something you really have to lean into. And then this is another big one. The danger of getting wrapped up in assuming everyone will instantly understand why you're so great.
Yes. And
absolutely. We're not saying that to knock you or to make you feel bad, but it's so easy to think like, to my previous point, your book inside and out, why your content's wonderful, why your way of doing things or your approach to something is unique in the market and better than what's out there. That's fantastic. But you have to be able to connect that dot for the people on the receiving end, for your potential buyers and the consumers. And you can't just assume they will take the time or instantly be able to figure it out. So that's why your messaging is really important. Taking what makes you special and making sure you're conveying that in really strategic, smart, intelligent ways that connect those dots and let people know that you have the answers that they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Just having your book sitting on the virtual shelf or even a local shelf is not enough. You really have to do that outreach,
Well, yes. And I think that you have to, as you pointed out, you really have to connect the dots for them.
Yeah.
Because they are not going to connect those dots on your behalf. Not because, and it's not at all because they're lazy, they just don't have the time. So you have to be able to present this to them in such a way that here are the reasons why this is going to matter to your listener, viewer, reader, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the ways that you can do that is by being vocal. So have some kind of an outlet, whether it's on your blog or on, if you have a podcast, or if you're doing a lot of podcasts, that's another great benefit too, is make sure that you are out there and you're talking about all the things related to your topic, because as you're pitching yourself. And I will tell you that, and again, when an author comes to us as the expert, as the book, book publicists, when I pitch an author to media and you don't have a website, which I got to tell you, I am not going to do, first off.
Right.
But if you pitch yourself to media and they look and you don't have a website and you don't really have a social media presence, I mean, unless you, or some famous person that came back from the dead or something, like I just, they're not, you know what I mean? They're not going to give you the time of day, unfortunately. And I hate to sound so cut and dry, but it really is. I mean, it can feel like a very unfeeling kind of world when you're going out there, you're pitching yourself, well, but I have an important message and this is really going to help people. And it matters to the readers because of all of these things. And you may have your pitch down pat, but if you're not vocal somewhere, like if you're not out there and you're not talking about this message, you can have the best pitch in the world and it's not going to matter.
Exactly. And that's not just us being, I appreciate that you said that, Penny, because that's just us being honest with you. We're like you said, we're not trying to get anybody down by if you're going, oh, well, that's working against me right now. Oh, I haven't done that yet. We're not trying to bum you out. We really want to set you up for success. And we see a lot of authors spend a lot of money doing things out of order or before their brand, your platform is really prepared to support your goals. And it's a great way to blow through a ton of marketing investment without very little return, no responses. And you're wondering, that's when we get authors coming to us and going, should I give up? And it's like, no, let's talk about this and figure out what's been done and what hasn't and see where we can help you fill in some gaps here. We do a lot of that.
Right, exactly. And I think the other thing to remember, part of the reason why we're being so, I hope we're not sounding critical because it's not our intention. Sometimes you don't get a second run at media. And I caution authors about this all the time. Like if you get put in a bucket by a producer that you're always pitching and there's no angle, there's no platform, there's nothing that they can really sink their teeth into, it's really going to get hard. It's really going to be hard. I mean, you essentially undermine yourself with that. So one of the things, if an author comes to me and they say, I really want to do national media, and Amy is actually probably way better at this than I am, because I really hate, even though I know I sound like I'm just crushing dreams all over the place, like I hate getting on the phone with an author and telling them, no, that's not,
no.
I really, Amy knows me so well. Like, I hate getting on the phone, like telling them no. And a lot of times Amy and I will have this conversation and I'll say, well, as we're putting together this proposal, well, this author really wanted XYZ. And she will very smartly come back to me and say, okay, well, we can give them X, but Y and Z are going to have to wait. And here are the 5 reasons why. And the majority of time that comes down to the things that we've talked about up to this point, because we know that if they're not ready, the media is not going to want them and they're going to shoot their shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
What?
No, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, definitely. So, and we've talked about this on other shows too, being current in your knowledge.
Yes.
This is a big one. And I like to use the term time capsule and Penny's a perfect example because she writes about Amazon. Amazon is constantly changing. So Penny really has, I mean, if you could pick a topic that would be one of the most challenging to stay on top of year after year, I think you would win, Penny.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, truly. The amount of revisions you have to do for your Amazon books is incredible just because to keep up with that company and everything that it's constantly doing and changing. And, it's challenging, but it matters to anybody definitely writing nonfiction. This one doesn't apply to fiction quite so much, but we've done episodes on, your backlist and improving, books that you've released previously. So check those out. But for nonfiction, you definitely want to be current in what's going on. And that's a huge part of the pitching too. A lot of this, plays off of each other. But when you're pitching somebody, like we've said already, you don't want to just pitch, this is what my book is about. I know you're going to love it. You really need to make sure you're tying into what's going on in the world, what's going on in your industry, what consumers are concerned with, what problems they're having. And so it's really important to stay current in what's being talked about. It's easy to get wrapped up into what your book is solely about, but a lot of times you as the person with the ideas, you are the one opening the doors to get coverage for your book. And a lot of times, Penny, we see that that will happen kind of not really with the book in mind initially. We'll say our client can speak to X, Y, and Z, and this is how they're different and things like that. And that's actually what gets them the coverage, which then gives them an opportunity to talk about their book, that they wrote a book. You can find more of this in my book, that kind of thing. But so often, the book isn't actually what secures the interest in the first place, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. The book generally is not the leader in the conversation. The book is the reason for the conversation potentially, but you are the leader in the conversation. I think staying current, I realize that everything that we're talking about is a full-time job, but staying current is really, really important. And it's going to matter. And it's going to be easier to stay current if you're doing lots of, as I first talked about, lots of local media, because that's also, I mean, the same rules apply to local. Like they want somebody that's going to be right for their audience and, et cetera. They also want you to be current. They don't want a guest to be on there citing statistics that are 5 years old. Right.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that, when it comes to social media, you don't have to be everywhere, just everywhere that matters, even if that means just being on one platform, right? And then sharing information, sharing knowledge and information on that platform is going to be really important. And it's not something you don't have to do it every single day, but you definitely want to find a routine that is consistent. And the information that you share on social media can be, Amy and I led this conversation by talking about how much content that we create. And sometimes that gets to be a little bit overwhelming. So we recycle a lot of stuff that we do. And part of that is like taking, podcast content and then excerpting for, when we run the shows on Friday on the blog and then posting that to social. So there's no reason that you have to continually recreate the wheel, but figure out a track, and you can use that content in all different places. You can use it in, in your socials and that kind of thing. So you're not having to create, like, if you're thinking and like, oh my gosh, but I need to have time to write the book. Great. You don't necessarily have to create new content for all these different portals all the time. You can create one piece of content and reuse it all the time. The other thing that I think is worth noting here, sometimes we get too close to our own message. Get a ChatGPT account, get a paid account. I am not a spokesperson for ChatGPT. I just want to mention that. Make sure that you put yourself in a locked system, meaning that there's a toggle in chat in the settings where you can choose to like share everything with everybody. And that's essentially how chat learns, or you can lock it. Put yourself in a locked system and upload your book to ChatGPT, your entire book, and ask it for talking points, ask it for relevant topics. Really ask this AI to dig into your book. Sometimes I've done it. And even though I update, I talk about Amazon, I teach about Amazon, Amy and I do lots of Amazon work. I wish I had a dime for every time I've said Amazon.com. I would be richer than Bezos, literally. At the same time, sometimes it's really hard to come up with your own content and chat. And the reason I mentioned is sitting in a locked system is that way you don't feel like you're uploading your book and chat's just going to use it for, 50 other people who have access to the same system. Put it in a locked system, and that way you can have access to a portal that will help you. It's like your second brain. And I cannot tell you how much this has really helped me tremendously to come up with new topics. And we do it for the podcast too. We're just like, how are we going to use this? So that's just an idea. And that is going to be a way to help you get come up with blog content, social media content, if you feel like you don't know what else to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one thing, as much as we've done shows on how to get around not using social media, but I would say this is one kind of, if you really want big media, it's really hard to do that nowadays without having some sort of social presence.
Yeah.
That's just, there are ways around it for a lot of other goals, but if one of your goals is big media, they don't just want to see that you signed up for an account. They want to see that you're using it.
Yep.
They want, and again, don't go out and buy 10,000 followers with some bots and stuff like that. It's not about that. It's about what content you're putting out there, like Penny was saying. Showcase your area of expertise, showcase your unique point of view, the followers and the engagement and stuff like that. If you're putting out good content, that can grow organically. So don't stress about the follower numbers as much as just showing that you're putting in the effort and that you're putting out quality content that further highlights what you have to offer. That is really should be the focus, not on the big numbers and things like that. That's not really why we're encouraging authors to get involved on social.
Right, exactly. Right.
Let's see.
You want to take the next one?
Oh, yes, because this is another one where I know I upset people. Like Penny said, I am definitely the bad guy for a lot of this, but I do try to let authors know when they, reach out to us that these are just, we want the best for you. It's tough love, but it really is, we want the best for you. The next one is having a solid website that's clean, it's modern, it's informative. Doesn't have to be over the top complicated. It doesn't have to be a bunch of different pages. Honestly, even a one pager that has the basics and that just shows that you're putting in the effort to create a home base for your brand and your platform and for, consumers to get a hold of you and learn more about you. That's what matters. It really is one of those things that shows that you're taking yourself seriously. And in turn, the people that you're pitching yourself to will take you more seriously as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And it doesn't have to be a complicated website, as Amy mentioned. Just something.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Just something.
Honestly, sometimes when they get too complicated, it's like I have the opposite reaction,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Just give me the good stuff.
Right. Yeah, don't give me too many options.
Yeah.
And I think that, obviously it goes without saying. So your Amazon retail page or retail pages, depending on how many books that you have out, you want to make sure that those are really tightened up. And I would say we've done enough shows on this. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. If you are new to the show and you want to dig into more Amazon stuff, we have a ton of content, so we won't spend a lot of time on this. But I think that you want to make, I don't think I know. You want to make a good first impression. You don't want to send people to a sloppy Amazon page. And the other reason is not just to impress the producer or the writer or whatever, or the host. You want to make sure that you're impressing the reader and anybody, like if you're lucky enough to land the gig, and sending people to your Amazon page that doesn't convert is really not going to do you any good.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important, not just for your resume, but also, later when you thinking positive when you get the interview.
Yeah. Again, and a lot of this, like we've said many times, it's the more seriously you take yourself, the more seriously they'll take you. So everything that we've mentioned so far is, like Penny said, it's a part of your resume. And you wouldn't leave something big and impressive off of your resume if you were applying for a new job. Same thing. Everything that you should have for your platform is a part of your author resume. So don't try to skirt around that and think, they won't notice, or it's really not big of a deal, or I'll deal with that later after I've made a bunch of money off my book. I think that would be, that's another one that you want to avoid that pitfall to. Do it at the front end. And Penny, I almost think we don't talk about that enough, how front loaded success as an author is.
Yeah, we really don't talk about it a lot. And I have this conversation with authors on the phone a lot of the times. Is publishing is hugely front loaded, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it gets, it does get incrementally easier as you release books, but publishing a book is very much a front loaded endeavor, not just monetarily, but also in your sweat equity. you really, really have to be willing to put, and you know, it's interesting. I didn't tell you this. On a Saturday, I love my little, like, it's confession time, everyone. I love my Reddit app. I love Reddit, actually. And a lot of people kind of poo-poo Reddit, but I mean, Amy and I have done it. There's a lot of deep dive research for things that we found on Reddit. And I'm in a publishing, I don't know if I'm still in it now. I may have gotten kicked out or something. I don't know. But so this one publishing thread, this author posted, I've already spent, I don't know, whatever they said. It was like $200 or something on their book cover. And now I'm finding that it's going to cost, upwards of $700 or so to get the book edited. And is there any way that I can avoid getting my book edited? And I went to town on that post. It was nice, but I was like, you are really in the wrong industry if you want to shortcut. There are shortcuts, and we've actually talked, I think we did a show on shortcuts. But there are shortcuts that you can take that, people aren't, the readers aren't necessarily going to notice, right? Or things that you can cut out, or ways to do things easier, because I think it's kind of human nature to want to kind of do everything the hard way.
Sure.
But your book presentation, your editing, and I mean, I just went to town on this Reddit post. And what's funny is that, like, I get notifications when somebody is like giving you the thumbs up on a post or something. I got nothing from that. Like, I'm sorry to be killing this party. It was the self-publishing track on Reddit. I'm sure of it. Like I said, I'm sure somebody kicked me out of the group at this point. But I was like, I come here speaking the truth. Y'all have to do the work. And then some other guy was like, why don't you just upload your manuscript to ChatGPT and have ChatGPT edit it? And just out of curiosity, I'm like, I'm not going to cut out hiring a real editor ever. But I decided to upload the formula workbook to ChatGPT and have it see what it come up with editing. It was a friggin' nightmare. ChatGPT doesn't know editing from apples. I mean, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? So anyway, yeah. I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but I just felt like I had to say that apparently I'm getting kicked off of Reddit now, for being honest. But I think that everything is your resume. We talk about this all the time. Absolutely everything is your resume. If you wouldn't send it to a potential employer, don't present it to your reader, and certainly don't present it to the media, right?
Right. Exactly. Highlight what you're proud of. Don't highlight what you're not proud of. Put it on your to-do list to work on,
Right. Exactly.
And I think the next one too is one that, and we get it. It's sometimes challenging. Marketing it's a skill, and it takes a schedule, and we realize that's hard to add to everything else going on in your life 100%, but you want to make sure you're consistently promoting and sharing your wins and any coverage you get.
Yeah.
This is really important, because if anything good that happens, we encourage you to find how can you capitalize on that in like 3 different ways. How do you make the most out of every single win? And you want to milk it for all it's worth. So this is why it's important to have social media, a website, because obviously those are 2 go-tos that you want to post coverage. We've talked about this before, but having a media page on your website, definitely sharing that coverage on social. When you're doing it on social, be sure you're tagging the entities and individuals.
Yeah.
If they're on social. You want to show them that, and this matters to other places too. They will see that you have shared coverage and you've tagged. I mean, you're sending traffic their way. All of that matters. That networking is critical.
Yes.
So it's twofold. So not only are you making sure that everything that you've earned, everything good that happens for you, you're making sure as many people as possible know about it. But then on top of it, you're using those opportunities to do some further networking with the kind of individuals that you could get coverage for later, or you can use that as part of your resume. When you go to pitch those next tier media, showing that, look, I got coverage here, I got coverage there. Make it easy for people to see how well you're doing, essentially, is what I'm saying.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So you definitely want to highlight all those things. We love when authors send us. I love it when clients send us, I got this, I got that. My interview is going to go live on this podcast on this date. And I sound like a broken record, but every single time, and they may hear it from me 5 or 6 times, but I always remind them what they can do with it. Like, we love that. Congratulations. That's amazing. Have you done X, Y, and Z with it yet? You know?
Yeah.
Because always, like, make that your goal. Anything good that happens, find at least three other ways at minimum that you can get that win out there in front of more people and make a big deal about it.
Yeah. And, I think it's to and I understand that for some authors, that's like, oh, well, I don't want to boast. I don't want to brag. And we're both here to tell you, you just brag your little heart out, because whenever you get any kind of a hit, and we have an influencer on the team, and we had asked her to do a tour for the podcast. And every single person, every single influencer who reviewed, and they didn't so much review the podcast as they shared it. I think some of them posted a review, like, we listened and we loved it, whatever. But they are, I went in and thanked every single one of them, because I think it's really important, unless you're going to be a one-hit wonder, share your wins, post them in your media room on your website. Make sure that you have one central place, so that when you're pitching media, you can send them the link and you can see where else they have been featured. It's also very impressive. Like, when I'm talking to an author and I see all the places they've been featured, it's like, oh, this is really great. But the other thing is, you want to make sure and thank everybody who, if you've been on a podcast, send them a thank you note. Influencers sharing, and then also share and tag them, as Amy said, because that's a great, great, great way to build relationships. And honestly, yes, it's about writing a good book. It's about all the things that we talk about on this show, but it's also very, very much about relationships. And you don't want to burn any bridges with people by not just reaching out to them or sharing their post to your group. It's a really, really nice thing to do. Even if you say, yeah, but Penny, I don't have a lot of followers, it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? It's the effort that matters. So
thank you. Yes, please. It's showing that you're following through and taking yourself seriously, even if you're just shouting to a room of 10 people.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Because the other thing to consider too is that you don't know where something is going to, you really don't know where something is going to go. You never know where something is going to go. So never make the assumption. We had an author who had a post that was featured on, and I can't remember now the name of the blog, but had a post that was featured on a particular blog. Katie Kirk found it, random, right? And ran it or bought the book, didn't even email the author to ask for a review copy, which she very easily could have, and raved about the book on her blog. And this, right? The connections, and Amy and I could do a whole entire show on this topic. Sometimes the connections make no sense. Mm-hmm. And this author even told me, she was like, I would have never expected this. And those are the best kind of wins, right? Mm-hmm. But you only get there if you're doing all the right things. So hopefully this show has been helpful and not discouraging, like I was on Reddit the other day. Oh my gosh. I get myself into so much trouble sometimes, but we appreciate you listening. Oh, and very excited. I meant to lead the show with this and I totally forgot, but the Amazon Author Formula Workbook is done. It's in final interior design. And by final, I mean really final. And maybe even by the time this show hits, it'll be up for pre-order. If it is, we will definitely add that to the show notes so y'all can be first to grab your copy. I'm so excited to have another book coming out this year. I want to thank you all so much for listening. We love show ideas. We love your show feedback. So how to get in touch with us is in the show notes. And if this is your first listen, thank you. We hope we haven't completely discouraged you from all things book marketing. But be sure to subscribe to the show so that you get notified every time there's an episode, which we drop every Friday. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.